Oh, no, it is shorter. Oh, yeah, we can do that. What casual games are like for someone who doesn't play games? We watched the what games are like for someone who doesn't play games last time. That was a really good video. I very much enjoyed that. So, I guess, let's see what this one's about. There's only so many times you can do one of these videos until you become someone who plays games. Like, after you've done, like, 10 or 20 of them, you are now someone who plays games. So, you know. Oh, wait, I didn't actually send the other one, did I? Hold on, I'll send the other video in the chat as well. Until your wife gets better than you, exactly. So let's have a look at this one.
Not too long ago, my wife, more popularly known as the lady I live with, made the mistake of agreeing to be the subject of a series of informal experiments where she tried out a handful of titles in order for me to see what games are like for those who don't spend much time playing them. Through these experiments, I've grown a better understanding of the challenges that come with learning the language of video games for the first time. A lot of barriers exist for those who are unfamiliar with typical game conventions and
That's just me playing Celeste, though. That's the thing. That's just me playing Celeste.
As most titles are designed in a way that assumes players have a baseline understanding of how games work, making it a difficult hobby for new players to pick up. With that said, it's been observed by many of you that the titles I've had her play haven't been that beginner-friendly. And
that's, yeah. Yeah, putting making one of your first video games Dark Souls is not a great way to do it. Like, if you're a kid, you're going to bash your head against the wall for like 6 hours and going to have fun. But if you're an adult, yeah, that might be a difficult way to go.
Yeah, that is a fair point. So I decided to continue her video game education and in turn mine by running another informal experiment. This time having her try out some of the games that I probably should have had her play in the first place. Ones less focused on fighting enemies and working through difficult platforming challenges, and more centered on relaxed gameplay that somewhat aligns with her actual interests. So I had her play 4 titles, all of which were roughly in the life sim genre. Those being Stardew Valley, The Sims 4, Slime Rancher, and of course, Animal Crossing New Horizons.
I've not played Slime Rancher. I've played all the others to like a little bit. I've noticed that his clips here of multiplayer for non-gamer video. He made her play League and FPS games. Oh my god. Like, I'm sure the League one went very well for the party.
I chose these games partly because they've been highly recommended by many of you as great entry points into gaming, and also because they share the core loop of gaining resources that are used to build up and customize the player's home base, which was an aspect my wife really enjoyed when she played Minecraft, so I figured these titles would give her
that's another one we need to watch as well.
Ultimately, I wanted to see what about these games makes so many people consider them to be good entry points into gaming, while also examining ways in which they may fall short for new players. As usual, I watched on as a mostly quiet observer, only occasionally reminding her of mechanics that each game had already gone over, and sometimes cluing her in on things that the game's never taught. So this is how it went.
I have played a lot of Stardew Valley. Let me just check. Hold up. Have I played as much as I think I've played? I actually don't. I'm not certain. Yeah, I've played 56 hours of Stardew Valley. Okay, I thought I'd played more of it. I love Stardew Valley. It's a great game. The problem with Stardew Valley is every time I go back to play it, I make a new save, so I've never actually done some of like the later content. Like, I'll play it like a lot for like a week, and then just stop playing it, and then I never get to like endgame.
In general, she found it a lot easier to figure out how to interact with various things in these titles than in the ones before it. And when I asked her about it, she said it was because she knew how to do most of the things the games wanted her to do in real life. Where something like bouncing off of stuff with a shovel to reach higher places, or killing an enemy up close to get health drops only really happen in video games, things like doing yard work, building relationships, and paying debts are activities she's
My favorite gameplay mechanic, paying taxes.
Experienced in her own life, which made it easier for her to guess how to engage with those mechanics.
Right.
So with fishing in Animal Crossing, while the game didn't explicitly tell her when to press the A button, she knew to wait until the fish pulled the bobber under the water instead of when it first nibbled, because she has fished before, and that's typically how it works. So she was—
That's actually a really good point. I love fishing mechanics in games. And I do like the ones that have, like, more complex mechanics, like Yakuza, for example, where you actually have to, like, move the rod around and all that. But as, like, your first entry, when you're not really sure how a game is supposed to work, I think keeping it as simple as possible really does help, I guess, bring someone into it in a way that wouldn't really be possible otherwise.
Was able to use her real-life knowledge to help her with the game. By having core gameplay mechanics centered around simple and familiar activities, it made it easier for her to grasp.
Sims is also a really great example of this. Like, as long as you know how to click on things, you can work out the Sims.
The basics. On the other side of things, Slime Rancher, which centers around sucking up slimes with a vacuum gun, storing them in a corral, and then harvesting their excrement to sell for money, took a little longer for her to grasp. Obviously, I don't think inexperienced players should only limit themselves to titles that are reflections of real life, but I do think that for someone just starting out, it can be a good way to familiarize themselves with controls and moving around in a digital space without being overwhelmed with somewhat obscure concepts. Along with her just having a little more experience with—
Don't put someone on League in their first game.
Games now, it also helped that none of these titles had all that much urgency to them. She had the time and space to figure things out without the threat of some—
I guess Stardew Valley has a little bit. Like, once you start actually playing the game and, like, wanting to get stuff done, like, you want to have, like, you want to make sure you're getting your crops done in the first, like, hour or two of the day and do all other like, little bits of optimization, but, like, yeah, it's not like, you know, you need to kill this enemy right now or the game ends sort of deal.
Something killing her, for the most part, at least.
Are you serious?
While failing to figure out a mechanic in a lot of games can lead to dying and losing a lot of progress, with these, that was less of a factor. So she figured out how to do things without as much frustration. That isn't to say that there was no frustration with figuring out controls and mechanics though, as these titles still fell victim to a lot of the same issues that exist in the other games she's played. The tutorial for The Sims 4 bombarded her with far too much information in a tiny window, and also had to engage with some of the most mundane aspects of the game. Inversely, Stardew Valley's tutorial was boiled down to this, leaving her with little direction. Slime Rancher gave a lot of—
I don't remember the tutorial of Stardew Valley. I guess I just kind of like blank that part out because I just know how to play the game. But man, if that is that the entire tutorial?
To this.
Just get out of bed. I guess if you played a game like Minecraft before, Stardew Valley makes a lot of sense. But if you haven't, like, yeah, I can imagine this being a bit overwhelming. And, like, especially not being sure about what your energy bar does, for example. Sims has death, permadeath at that. Yeah, that's true.
Leaving her with little direction. Slime Rancher gave a lot of useful tips early on, but they were on the far right side of the screen, and as she typically has tunnel vision for whatever is directly in front of her, she sometimes missed important information. And Animal Crossing, despite over-explaining nearly everything in the game, doesn't tell players certain bits of key information, the most important being how to sprint. As a side note, given that sprinting in previous Animal Crossing games caused the grass to fade away, I assumed it would do the same in this one, so I decided not to tell her that sprinting was even an option in order to keep our island looking pristine. I later learned that that is not a mechanic in New Horizons though, so
What?
whoops.
Really? Now you tell me that?
Wait, sprinting made the grass what? Sure, whatever.
Well, I've talked a fair bit throughout this series about how unexplained mechanics like these can act as massive barriers to new
L3, my
players.
favorite
During this
button.
experiment, I noticed a few instances where unexplained mechanics actually benefited my wife's experience. Like in Slime Rancher. One of the early challenges of the game is figuring out how to best store the various slimes. There aren't really prompts that explain the best practices though, so as my wife collected various slimes, she dropped them in corrals without much rhyme or reason. Her first attempt resulted in a mass slime escape, leading to an intense moment moment of panic and excitement as she tried to gather them all up before they got too far away. Had the game said exactly what would happen if she mixed slimes together or put too many of them in the same pen, she would have been more careful and missed out on an entertaining moment. What's great is that the mistake didn't have a massive consequence, and it taught her to be more careful, so it ended up being a much more interesting learning experience than a prompt ever could have been. If important information is not communicated to the player, there should always be a
Did you just try to hit them with an axe?
reason for it, aside from
Very
the
different
assumption that
game.
they already know how it works. Really, the biggest barrier for inexperienced players is how games communicate information, and that isn't just tied to teaching them controls or mechanics. It's also about properly communicating to them why they should keep playing, and that is done by establishing
Progression and purpose. Stardew Valley, like, once you start getting into it, like, there's a lot, like, just managing your farm by the first couple of months in, you're not really managing your farm to the same extent anymore. You sort of just, like, let it do its own thing. And you're just, like, doing things outside of that, like the mines and all that other stuff.
Something that has been pretty consistent throughout all the experiments is that my wife likes to have a specific goal to complete when she plays a game. On top of that, she also appreciates when there are multiple ways to complete that goal. Having a clear motivation is important for any player, but it is especially helpful for those who don't know enough about games to set their own goals. Of all of the games she played for this experiment, Animal Crossing did the best job communicating its primary goals to her in a way that felt satisfying. She got a tent, accrued debt, then she was told she can earn miles and bells by accomplishing various tasks. So it was clear what she needed to do and why she needed to do it. With The Sims 4, Slime Rancher, and Stardew Valley, she was given more of an open-ended goal. That
Yeah, well, I guess Stardew Valley has some quest quest lines to follow, but they're not as obvious, I guess, as a game like Animal Crossing. I would have thought that, like, the open-ended stuff would actually work pretty well, but maybe not. I guess it depends on the kind of person, right? Where some people are really happy about doing open-ended stuff, like, especially people that like doing, like, painting, for example. Like, you know, putting a person like that into Minecraft, where it's entirely open-ended, you set your goal, I think would work really well, but I've played a little bit. Not enough to say that, like, I'm experienced at the game.
of building up her farm and her home. While all four of these games essentially have the player do the same thing, earn money to unlock new stuff, it was a lot easier for her to quantify her success in Animal Crossing by seeing how much she had left to pay on her debts. Due to the other titles not having as clear of benchmarks, she felt a bit directionless when playing them. Every activity in Animal Crossing had meaning to her because it was working towards paying off her home, but the activities in the other games didn't have that same sense of purpose because the goal was more nebulous.
Right.
She knew the idea was to improve her farm, ranch, or home, but it was a little more difficult to find out where to start.
And The Sims, you don't... For me, The Sims is way too open-ended for me to care about it. Like, I cannot have fun playing The Sims. Just wants to play Debt Simulator.
To be honest, when watching her play Stardew Valley, I was shocked at how much she struggled to find purpose, because when I played, I had no issue with that. As I thought about it more though, I realized that before even starting the game, I had specific goals in mind, because it had been pitched to me as a spiritual successor to Harvest Moon, a series I had put countless hours into throughout my childhood.
I never played Harvest Moon, so I didn't have that experience, but I still got the idea of, hey, we're starting a farm, we're watering the farm. Oh, let's go find out what these other people have. Let's go follow these quest lines. Oh, and then I found the community center, and the community center is such a big driving force early game on what you want to do. And then you eventually unlock the boss, and you can go to, like, the desert area, and there's, like, other areas you can go to. And there's the mine. The mine is such a big driving force as well, because you're like, oh, well, I can get further in this if I have better food and better gear. So, like, it made sense for me, but again, that's all, like, game knowledge stuff. If you don't have that knowledge of why that stuff matters, I can see this being, like, you're getting a bit lost.
What the major goals would be due to my understanding of and nostalgia for the series it was paying homage to. So finding motivation in Stardew Valley took no effort on my part. Obviously, as my wife didn't grow up with the same experience, she had nothing to pull from when jumping into it. I'm sure that not every inexperienced player will have trouble finding direction and setting their own objectives in games, but I do think it helps a lot.
Honestly, not sure if the list of games she listed out is really appropriate balance. A lot of these casual games are a homogenous pile of farming and crafting games. Feel like you put some slightly more core games, something like Pokemon or turn-based RPG from Nintendo, or one for kids. I think I'd be kind of curious to see this video. Bronson, if the video exists, tell me. I'd be kind of curious to see what would happen if you put her in like more like mascot platformer games where there's like a clear. There's like a clear direction that you should be going, right? Something like, you know, Crash Bandicoot, things like that. They did do Mario in the previous video. So that was already done. But I'm talking like a 3D platformer where there's like still a clear goal of what you need to do.
When games set immediate objectives for players to start working towards. Eventually, I decided to tell her some of the major things she could do in each game, and once I did, she had an easier time getting into the core gameplay of most of the titles, with the exception of The Sims 4. She really loved the idea of building and designing an awesome house that we would never be able to afford in real life. However, the actual act of earning enough money to build the house she wanted to was tedious and boring. It consisted of her choosing jobs for our Sims and then sending them off to work for about 8 hours, leading to the game fast forwarding for a minute or so while she waited for us to get home. While in other games she earned money by engaging with core gameplay, in The Sims 4 she earned money through an absence of gameplay, creating dull downtime and no real connection between her actions and the reward. On top of that, the amount of money earned from one day of work in The Sims is pretty tiny. So
it's almost like having a real job. It's almost like having a real job.
In order for her to build the kind of house she wanted to, she would have had to play for a long time.
Yep.
I made $136. Killing it!
In the hopes of avoiding the lives of our Sims becoming eerily accurate reflections of our own, we decided to speed up the process so that she could engage with the element of the game she found most interesting.
Game's downloaded.
Using cheat codes. Once she had a cool $9,999,999, The Sims 4 went from being a game she had been getting bored of quickly to one she spent nearly a dozen hours in designing.
Honestly, I think that's a totally fine way to play a game like this. If you don't care about the core gameplay and you just want to build a house, like, great. Awesome. Like, I get that part of the game being entertaining. I don't get the Sims part of it, like the life simulation. I think that is horrendously boring. I have no interest in watching just watching people go about their lives. That's not my jam.
Well, I'm glad the game had a way for her to play in the way she wanted to. I couldn't help but think that this sort of thing should have just been a game mode instead of an option hidden behind a cheat code. Cheats are probably most useful to inexperienced players, but given their lack of knowledge about games, they're unlikely to know.
I'm sorry, what the hell are you running this game on?
But given their
Look at these textures. Are you running this on a PS2? What? Why does the game look this bad?
Knowledge about games, they're unlikely to know or assume that a title may have codes they could enter. Obviously, this isn't that prevalent of a problem as cheat codes have
Potato
largely
PC
vanished from games, but that actually leads to a bigger issue. A lot of titles don't offer enough options for players of all types. I think a lot of games would benefit from following the lead of titles like Celeste, which has an assist mode that allows players to adjust various game mechanics to suit their needs.
Dead Cells has the same thing as well,
while also making it clear that it isn't the intended way to play the game. When we talk about accessibility, it's often in relation to making a game less difficult. But
is there a Taz assist mode? Because I've seen regular Taz Celeste. I can only imagine how broken this game becomes in assist mode. If that exists, I want to see that.
also think it's important to consider it from the perspective of making a game more interesting to certain players. This sort of thing doesn't work for every title out there, but for something like The Sims 4, which has two pretty distinct phases of the game,
Probably nobody wants to do it.
Allowing for some sort of option that lets the player just focus on one of those things without having it tied to a cheat code would be nice. I found that people who play games often are far more willing to stick with the title they aren't entirely sold on than those who don't.
You say that, but I found some stuff. There is some stuff here. There's not much, but it does exist.
Really play games. So it is massively important to provide inexperienced
It kills the interesting platforming. I think it would break it even harder. Like, I've seen some of the high-level Celeste mechanics. I want to know what can happen if you can just spam them infinitely.
Reason to want to keep playing. And really, only one of these games did that for my wife.
Has debug?
So, are casual titles the best way for new players to get into games? The answer is a definitive probably.
Any percent 0 seconds with debug tools? There's one.
These kinds of titles offer a relaxed environment for inexperienced players to get used to moving around.
It's a meme upload, obviously.
While learning the core concepts of a game. While my wife never felt the same levels of accomplishment that she did when completing certain tasks in more difficult games, she also didn't have to deal with the frustration that comes from continual failure. With that said, there are a lot of factors that go into choosing a good starting point for an inexperienced player that go beyond a title's gameplay. The most obvious being finding a game that fits their interests. In the first experiment, I threw my wife into a handful of titles with settings and stories that she had little to no interest in. My guess is that if someone has gone there...
Yeah, even if you are really interested in gaming, if you're the kind of person that only plays games like Stardew Valley... No, actually, better example. If you're the kind of person who only plays games like FIFA and Madden, and you chuck them into a game like Skyrim, I could... even if they understand how games work, I can see why they would just not want to do that.
Entire life without really getting into video games, they're probably more likely to be interested in the settings and concepts that are prevalent in life sim titles. There's also a lot of reasons on the more technical side of things. As we've continued doing these experiments, I've noticed more and more...
Don't underestimate bro gamers. No, I don't mean bro gamers. I mean the people who are not gamers who only play FIFA. I mean the people who literally play nothing but FIFA. I know what you're talking about. But, like, I mean the guys who, they wouldn't consider themselves a gamer at all. They only play FIFA, and they buy FIFA every year, and that is all they play. I know what you're talking about, though. I do... Yeah, you're talking about the people who, like, they have, like, the FIFA friends. Like, they're the gamer that also plays a lot of FIFA. Those people, yes, they love the AAA slop. You are absolutely correct there. I have no doubt about that.
It's pretty nauseous while playing first-person titles, and that became extremely apparent while playing Slime Rancher.
I just don't like these kinds of games.
What about it?
Just, yeah, because they're nauseating.
Simulation sickness is something...
That I understand. The people who see video games and FIFA as too... Yeah, those people. Yeah. Or, like, you find someone who is, like, a sim racer guy and only plays, like, Assetto Corsa, for example. Yeah, first-person issues I definitely see as a problem, especially on games that have really low field of view. I experience, like, problems when I play... really low FOV games as well. But I can see someone not being used to games who's just not used to a turning camera. I don't personally like fixed point cameras, but I can certainly see for some people that actually being like a benefit.
A fair amount of people suffer from while playing first-person titles. And while it can affect anyone, people who play games regularly are less likely to be consistently bothered by it because they end up spending more time...
This is why Minecraft has an option to disable the bobbing.
...acclimating to that sort of stimulus. So despite Slime Rancher having a lot of qualities that make it an appealing game for new players, the mere fact that it is in a first-person perspective might be really difficult for an inexperienced player to adjust to.
I get really bad motion sickness when I play VR games. I'm sure if I played a lot more VR games, I would get used to it. But because I usually play VR games like once a year at a con, pretty much unless I'm playing Beat Saber, I cannot do VR games for that long. Like 30 minutes or an hour, and I'm just done.
Without the proper aids. After some research and experimentation, I found that having her play in windowed mode with an unmoving image in the background helped a fair bit. In general though, first-person titles are probably a little riskier to start with than third-person ones. Beyond that, even just the way a game looked had a direct influence on her interest in it. Typically, she's found titles with a more retro art style to be less appealing than ones with more modern graphics. One of her major complaints about Stardew Valley was that she couldn't tell what things were. Pixel art is often a little abstract, meaning it calls for those looking at it to extrapolate meaning from blocky edges and a lack of detail. For people like me who grew up playing games with this sort of style, it's probably become second nature to do that. But that wasn't the case for my wife. Obviously, it wasn't impossible for her to figure out what certain things were supposed to be, but it wasn't always immediate.
Is she playing with a controller? I think I don't play Stardew Valley with a controller. I see this red square here. I assume that means that's the like controller selection.
Either. So she preferred the games where she didn't need to think about that sort of thing at all. While everyone has different tastes and responses to art styles, when trying to get an inexperienced player into a game, it's important to consider not only what kind of style is most appealing to them, but also what will communicate information to them in the most easily understandable way. Lastly, I think
probably a
games that
Switch
have an
version.
optional co-op feature can be incredibly helpful to new players. Through these sorts of modes, they can pick up on various things that someone with more experience does while playing and implement it into the way they play. It's a far better teaching tool than
That's actually a really good point. I think that works for everyone, not just like someone who's really new to a game. But if you're playing a co-op, let's go the game I've been playing a lot of, Monster Hunter, right? If you are in a group with a Monster Hunter player and they dodge a monster in a way that you wouldn't have even thought of, that's something you can now very easily implement into your own strategy, even if they're using a different weapon. Like, if you keep getting hit by an attack and you pay attention to the way that they dodge and they, like, circle around in a certain way, you're like, oh, that makes sense. I can just do that and I won't die.
Over their shoulder and just telling them what to do. My wife and I ended up playing a fair bit of Animal Crossing together, and while I don't think that game does a great job with local co-op, having to stay within the same screen ended up teaching her a lot about how I play. So yeah, look, what I'm trying to say, if it hasn't become obvious already, is that Animal Crossing New Horizons is the perfect entry point into gaming for someone with similar tastes as my wife. At this point,
this video is brought to you by Nintendo.
She has put more time into New Horizons than all of the other games she's played throughout the series combined. And unlike any other title, she's continued to play it even when I wasn't around to watch. So I figured instead of trying to overanalyze why that is any more than I already have, I'd just ask her.
So why do you think you've played Animal Crossing more than any other game so far?
I think because everybody likes Animal Crossing, everyone's playing it, and it strangely enough makes me feel like I'm a part of this exciting thing that's happening, and that's what makes it fun. And it makes me spend apparently more than 50 hours playing it. 60. Great.
No, I get that. I get that, and I don't know, maybe a game like Pokemon actually would work for her. I don't know.
And speaking of segues, wires, am I right? As someone who
is this a Raycon ad? Is this a Raycon ad?
Stuff. It's really nice not to be tethered to a device all the time. And this video sponsor, Raycon, provides just that. Raycon makes high-quality wireless earbuds that sound as great as other
I know it was coming. I knew it had to happen.
Price. Beyond just sounding good, they're also really comfortable to the point where I almost always forget when I'm wearing them. And
they do look nice.
If you're the person who likes to exercise or just shake your head around a lot,
oh my god, he has
never
a face
fallen out of my ear, which is great. Their latest model, the Everyday
This is not my ear.
earbuds,
is it someone else's ear?
They have 6 hours of playtime, seamless Bluetooth pairing, tons of bass, a more compact design that gives a nice noise isolating fit, and they come in new fun colors. If you click the link in the description, you can get 15%
That link
off
probably doesn't work
order.
anymore, but yes, if it does work, you go buy some Raycons from his
I
link.
use all the time. So if you're in the market, you should definitely check out Raycon because they make an awesome pair. Anyway, thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring this video.
Thank you,
For
Raycon.
all of you still watching, I appreciate you very, very much. More stuff is on the way, so keep an eye out. So yeah,
this is a great
hope you
channel.
Have a great day and or night. And I'll see you in the next one.
I really like this guy's video. Oh, wait, there's a post-credit thing. Let's see what this is.
Do you ever game so hard that it hurts?
Yes. Actually, yes. Do you ever game so hard that it hurts? There have been many a time that I've sat down for 12 hours without standing, and then I stand, and then it's a problem.
What? I'm being serious. My thumbs hurt.
Actually true as well. When I was like first starting to get used to playing Dead Cells and getting used to using a D-pad again. Using a D-pad was rough when I started getting used to it. Celeste on controller, yeah. So both Celeste and Dead Cells took a bit of time for me to get used to using the D-pad again.
Like, genuinely. Like, I'm not kidding. Can you please stop laughing at me?
That's a great video. That is honestly a really good video. I'll send the link in the chat as well. Is it ethical to make your wife addicted to Animal Crossing? It's more ethical than meth. So I'll give you that. Do with that information as you will. Yeah, I played some PS2 games a few weeks ago. It hurts my hands so much. What else does he actually have in the playlist? Playlist. Breath of the Wild, Minecraft, on online multiplayer. Oh no. Virtual reality, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3. Oh no. Oh no.